Downtown Toronto one-bedroom condos under 400K are not a future prediction anymore. They are here. Just a few months ago, the headlines were all about bachelor and studio units dipping under 300K, which at the time was very shocking. Now we're seeing something different. One-bedroom condos are going under 400K, and it's not just one or two or three of them, over 45 of them so far. So in this video, I want to walk you through what the very bottom of the GTA condo market actually looks like, what these ultra cheap units really get you, and why the assignment space is getting increasingly aggressive with trying to get rid of those units. And then we're also going to compare what a $400,000 one-bedroom lifestyle actually feels like by exploring some units. Because there's a huge difference between cheap and livable. So let's start at the absolute lowest end of the market. The cheapest condo sale in Toronto this year was actually an estate sale at 323 Richmond, which traded at $239,000. And when you look at the unit, you immediately understand why. It's pretty small. The kitchen is actually proper, but it also takes up 40% of the living space. So you're going to need a Murphy bed in these units. Now you might think I can make that work, but from experience with many clients who have lived in units this size, the day-to-day cramped space ends up taking a toll. Let's go up slightly in price to something like the unit at 1195 Queensway that sold for $280,000 recently. It's definitely more modern and functional, and visually it feels a lot nicer too, but the size constraints are still very real. And that's also something that buyers often underestimate. So finishes, they can improve, but the square footage is the square footage. There's no decorating your way out of limited space. Another interesting one was 1 King Street, which sold for $295,000 recently under a power of sale. Now, this building has a mixed-use structure, so it's combined hotel and residential units. And that setup, even though it sounds cool, it tends to introduce a lot of complications that a lot of people don't think about. So the owners there are always arguing with management over a variety of issues and how the hotel side's getting favoritism. And you can also run into some financing differences, some quirks, let's say, where you need more of a down payment. There's obviously additional rules. And if you're going to rent them out, you have to rent them out through the building. And so it's very different than a typical condo building, 1 King West. You'll always see them have cheaper units. And that's one of those properties I usually tell clients to approach very cautiously or just avoid. I'm actually very curious about what you all think about these units. Could you realistically see yourself living in one of these micro or ultra compact condos? Or would that feel unbearable for you? Let me know in the comments. Now, going on to 33 Charles, this property sold for $315,000. So for the size, the layout is actually not terrible, but there's a pattern I've seen repeatedly with units like this that they don't necessarily mind sometimes the concept of living in a studio. It feels minimal, efficient, but many owners end up selling much sooner than they expected simply because daily life starts to feel very restrictive. You don't have much storage for anything. Having guests over feels very awkward. And the lack of separation between spaces, it will weigh on you over time. By the way, if you're new here, I'm Karl, and I help buyers and sellers move across the GTA. If you want to chat about your situation, I'd be happy to give advice. Just click the link in the description to schedule a call. Now, here's where the story gets more interesting. So while studios have been taking the biggest hits, one-bedroom condos have been drifting lower and lower to the point now where we've got $400,000 and below unit selling. And so, like I said, there's over 45 one-bedroom units that have sold under $400,000 this year. And I think that number is going to keep growing. Now, when you look at the whole situation, when you zoom out, the reason behind this isn't that mysterious. Because if you look at the broader trend in condo prices, the downward pressure actually makes a lot of sense when you consider how aggressively developers leaned into micro unit construction over the last cycle. So during the peak year of 2022, that's where prices were at their highest, the square footage in units was simply reduced. Instead of building larger, more flexible units, the market became flooded with smaller and smaller layouts, designed primarily to hit price points that investors could justify. So under 500 square feet units became extremely common. Larger couple or family-oriented designs, they became way less of a priority. And now we're seeing how that plays out in the resale dynamics. So 2-bedroom units, they have been holding their value a lot better because buyers can picture themselves living there long term. 1-bedrooms are sitting in the middle, and then you've got studios and bachelor apartments or these micro units. They are really struggling because the demand is naturally way more limited. So there's only so many buyers willing to live that small. And the reason why this all occurred is because the greedy developers, they were really targeting mom and pop investors by making things as affordable as possible, right? So they had to go small so that people could pay the peak prices. Now, when we look at the assignment market, take a look at these layouts. So many of these projects were built around investor-driven floor plans, extremely compact layouts that made sense in a rapidly rising market where appreciation did most of the heavy lifting. But today, even with noticeable discounts, assignments aren't selling. Nobody wants to catch a falling knife in a new condo build. So let's take a look at some of these $400,000 and under opportunities. The experience changes more than you'd expect. So having a separate bedroom isn't just a technical upgrade, it improves how the space functions. So your sleeping area is no longer isolated. Your living space becomes usable, and day-to-day life feels much less compressed. Yes, these units are still small by traditional standards, but for many people, whether they're students, single professionals, hybrid workers who only need a downtown base a few days a week, they can absolutely serve a practical purpose. Now the challenge again is supply. There are simply a lot of these units competing for attention, and it's only going to increase throughout the year, which is exactly why the prices have softened. The condo market in Toronto has already collapsed. It's still repricing, and smaller units are feeling the most pressure. And that repricing is exactly why we're seeing these $400,000 and under 1-bedroom opportunities. So for some buyers, these are going to be very interesting. For others, it's going to be still a hard pass. But either way, it is a trend worth paying very close attention to. If you would like help buying or selling a property in the GTA, fill out that contact form below, and I'd be happy to learn about your situation and goals and see how we can be of help. Until next time, thanks for watching.